My name is David Chen, and until 3 months ago, I was just another software engineer in Silicon Valley. Now I'm sitting on one of the most valuable discoveries in recent agricultural history. All because my grandfather knew something about his worthless farm that nobody else did. I can still remember the day of the will reading perfectly. The law office in downtown Sacramento was packed with relatives, all dressed in expensive clothes and wearing expectant expressions. My cousins, Mark and Linda, kept shooting me condescending looks in my worn jeans and work shirt. I'm driven straight from my job at a tech startup, not bothering to change. At least try to look professional, Linda whispered as I sat down. This is a serious matter. I ignored her, just as I've been ignoring their jabs for years. Ever since I'd chosen to study agricultural science alongside computer engineering, they treated me like the family disappointment. Never mind that I'd put myself through college or that my startup was doing well. To them, anything connected to farming was beneath our sophisticated family. Grandfather Chen had been different. A first-generation immigrant who built a successful import-export business, he never forgot his farming roots. While my cousins bragged about their luxury cars and country club memberships, he'd spend hours telling me about sustainable agriculture and the future of farming. His eyes would light up when we discussed soil composition or irrigation techniques. The land remembers, David, he'd say, gazing out over his sprawling farm in a Sacramento valley. It remembers everything we do to it, good or bad. The lawyer cleared his throat, bringing me back to the present. Now to the distribution of assets, he began, adjusting his glasses. To my grandchildren Mark and Linda, I leave my holdings in Chen Import-Export, valued at approximately $5 million each. My cousins exchanged triumphant smiles. Mark actually pumped his fist under the table. To my grandson David, the lawyer continued, I leave my farm property in Sacramento Valley, including all structures and equipment thereon. The room erupted in poorly concealed laughter. My Aunt Patricia actually snorted. Old tractors and dirt, she muttered. How appropriate. I sat there quietly, remembering my last conversation with Grandpa Chen. It was 2 weeks before he passed, during one of my regular Sunday visits. He'd been unusually serious that day. David, he'd said, his voice weak but urgent. Promise me something. Promise you'll keep the farm, no matter what anyone offers you for it. Promise you'll work the land yourself, at least for one growing season. I promised, not understanding then why it was so important to him. The farm had been losing money for years, everyone knew that. Grandpa had kept it running out of sentiment, but most of the family considered it an embarrassing relic of our immigrant past. There's one more item, the lawyer said, pulling out a sealed envelope. A private letter for David, to be opened only after accepting or declining the farm inheritance. My cousins were already standing, gathering their things. They'd gotten what they wanted, the profitable family business. The worthless farm could go to the family oddball who actually cared about such things. Don't spend all your dirt in one place, Mark laughed as they headed for the door. Linda paused beside me, her designer purse swinging. You should sell it quickly, she advised, trying to sound concerned. Before property taxes eat you alive. I'm sure some developer would take it off your hands. After they'd all left, I sat with the lawyer and formally accepted the inheritance. He handed me the sealed letter, along with a ring of old keys labeled in my grandfather's neat handwriting. Back in my car, I opened the letter with trembling hands. The paper was thick, expensive stationery that Grandpa reserved for important documents. My dearest David, if you're reading this, you've accepted the farm as I hoped you would. Your cousins will think I've played a cruel joke on you, leaving them the profitable business while you get a money-losing farm. But you, with your double degree in agriculture and technology, will understand what I've done once you find it. The key marked BS7 opens something important in the back of the north barn. Look behind the feed bins, and remember what I taught you about the land remembering. Don't trust anyone with what you find. Not the family, not friends, no one. You'll understand why. All my love, Grandfather. I drove straight to the farm, my mind racing. The property was exactly as I remembered. 200 acres of seemingly ordinary farmland, a weathered farmhouse, and 3 old barns. The north barn was the largest, used mainly for equipment storage. The sun was setting as I parked by the barn, casting long shadows through the oak trees Grandpa had planted decades ago. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of oil and old hay. I made my way to the back, where rusty feed bins lined the wall. It took an hour of careful searching before I found it, a slight irregularity in the wooden wall behind the heaviest bin. Using a crowbar from the toolshed, I managed to shift the bin just enough to reveal a small, cleverly concealed door with an old-fashioned safe dial. The key marked BSS7 opened a panel beside the dial, revealing a numeric keypad. Modern security hidden behind an antique facade. Typical grandpa mixing old and new. But what was the code? "The land remembers," I muttered, thinking about his words. Then it hit me. The farm's original purchase date, the day my grandfather first owned this land. With shaking fingers, I punched in the numbers. 5,171,972. The safe clicked open. Inside was a thick folder filled with papers, soil samples sealed in preserved containers, and a USB drive that looked relatively new. On top was another letter from my grandfather, dated just 6 months ago. "David, what you found represents 20 years of research and development. The soil samples are from different sections of the farm, taken over 2 decades. The drive contains all my data, and the papers explain everything. Remember how I always said this valley had unique soil? I was right. The mineral composition here is unlike anywhere else in California. When treated properly with the organic farming methods I've developed, it produces crops with twice the normal nutrient density and 3 times the yield. I've had independent labs verify everything. The patents are all filed, but I've kept them secret pending final testing. The formulas, the methods, the documentation, it's all there. But it only works with the specific soil composition, which only exists on this farm. That's why you must keep the land. That's why I couldn't let your cousins get hold of it. They'd sell it to the first developer who made an offer, not understanding what they had. But you'll understand. With your background in agricultural science and technology, you'll know exactly what to do with this discovery. The land remembers, David. And now you know what it's been remembering all these years. Love, Grandfather." I sat on the dusty barn floor, reading through the papers with growing amazement. Soil composition analyses, crop yield data, nutrient density comparisons, all meticulously documented over 20 years. My grandfather hadn't been running a failing farm. He'd been conducting the most thorough agricultural research study I'd ever seen. And he kept it all secret, knowing that once the truth got out, everyone would want a piece of it. The implications were staggering. In an era of increasing food insecurity and declining soil quality, my grandfather had discovered and documented a way to dramatically improve crop yields and nutrient content. As the full impact of what I'd inherited began to sink in, I heard cars approaching on the gravel driveway. Headlights swept across the barn walls, several vehicles. Through the barn door, I could see my cousin's luxury cars pulling up. Of course, they followed me, probably expecting to find me crying over my worthless inheritance. I quickly locked the safe and slid the bin back into place. Grabbing a rusty wrench from a nearby workbench, I made sure I looked appropriately grimy and discouraged when they walked in. "Taking inventory of your great fortune," Mark called out, his voice echoing in the empty barn. "I hear used tractors are really hot on eBay these days." Linda picked her way carefully across the dirty floor in her expensive heels. "David, be reasonable," she said. "This place is a money pit. We'll help you find a good developer. You could probably get enough to buy a nice condo." I gripped the wrench tighter, thinking about the treasure trove of research hidden just feet away. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound defeated. "I'll think about it." They left after a few more minutes of gloating, satisfied that they'd witnessed my disappointment firsthand. As their cars disappeared down the driveway, I leaned against the barn wall and smiled. Let them think they'd won. Let them enjoy their import-export business. Grandpa had left me something far more valuable. A legacy that could change the future of farming. Now I just had to figure out how to develop it without anyone discovering the truth too soon. I looked out over the darkening fields, seeing them with new eyes. Somewhere out there, in that special soil, was the key to revolutionizing agriculture. And my grandfather had trusted me, not his successful business-minded grandchildren, but the oddball engineer who loved farming, to bring it to the world. But first, I had work to do. Secret work, just like Grandpa had done for 20 years. And I had to do it while convincing my family that I was just stubbornly holding onto a worthless piece of land. I locked up the barn and headed to the farmhouse, my mind already racing with plans. Tomorrow, I would start analyzing Grandpa's research. Tomorrow, I would begin the most important project of my life. But tonight, standing on the porch of my inherited farmhouse, I raised a quiet toast to my grandfather. "The land remembers," I whispered. "And so do I." The next 3 months were a blur of activity. I took a sabbatical from my tech job, telling everyone I needed time to figure out what to do with the farm. In reality, I was working harder than I ever had in my life. Grandpa's research was extraordinary. He developed a completely organic method of soil treatment that activated something unique in the valley's mineral composition. Crops grown in this enhanced soil didn't just have higher yields. They were more resistant to disease, required less water, and contained nutrient levels that agricultural scientists would have deemed impossible. I converted the old farmhouse's dining room into a lab, setting up soil testing equipment and computer models. My tech background proved invaluable as I digitized and analyzed 20 years of handwritten notes and data. Grandpa had been methodical, documenting everything from weather conditions to mineral ratios with scientific precision. The first warning that others might suspect something came 6 weeks after I'd moved in. I was in the north field, taking soil samples, when a black SUV pulled up to the farm gate. A well-dressed man emerged, holding what looked like official papers. "Mr. Chen," he called out, "I'm Richard Maxwell from AgriCorp Industries. We've heard you might be interested in selling this property." I leaned on my shovel, buying time to think. AgriCorp was one of the largest agricultural corporations in the country. They hadn't shown any interest in this valley for decades. Why now? "Not interested," I called back. "Family land." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're prepared to make a very generous offer, well above market value." Still not interested. He left his card wedged in the gate before driving away. That evening, I called my friend Tom from the county agricultural office. "AgriCorp's been buying up land all over the valley," he told me. "Started about 2 months ago, really aggressive about it too. Nobody knows why. The soil reports show nothing special about the area." Nothing special in the standard reports, maybe, but Grandpa's research showed why this valley was unique. Had someone else figured it out? The next day, I got an urgent call from Linda. "David, don't be an idiot," she said without preamble. "I heard AgriCorp offered you 3 times market value for that wasteland." "News travels fast," I replied dryly. "This is your chance. You could make actual money instead of playing farmer. Mark and I are worried about you, living out there alone, wasting your time." I almost laughed. While they'd been worried about me, I'd been documenting crop yields that would revolutionize farming. The test plots I'd planted using Grandpa's methods were showing results even better than his records predicted. "Thanks for your concern," I said, "but I promised Grandpa." She hung up with an exasperated sigh, but the pressure was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, more corporate representatives showed up. Some were subtle, others less so. One afternoon, I found Maxwell from AgriCorp talking to my farmhand, Miguel. "Mr. Maxwell was asking about the soil tests you've been running," Miguel told me later. "Offered me money to share information." Miguel had worked for my grandfather for 15 years. His loyalty wasn't for sale, but the incident worried me. They knew something was happening here. I increased security around the farm, installing cameras and motion sensors under the guise of modernizing the operation. The safe in the barn was now protected by both electronic and physical measures. I moved the most sensitive documents to a secure location off-site. Then came the night that changed everything. I was working late in my makeshift lab when Miguel called. "Someone's breaking into the north barn," he said quietly. 2 men, professional looking. I pulled up the security feed on my laptop. The intruders were methodical, checking every corner, moving equipment. They were getting closer to the hidden safe. "Call the sheriff," I told Miguel. "I'll stall them." I grabbed a shotgun Grandpa kept for coyotes and headed to the barn. As I approached, I heard voices. "The soil samples have to be here somewhere." The old man was onto something. "The mineral analysis proves it." "Keep looking. Maxwell wants everything. AgriCorp's betting big on this." I chambered around loudly. The sound echoed in the barn. "Evening, gentlemen. You're trespassing." They spun around. Even in the dim light, I could see they weren't common thieves. Their clothes and equipment screamed corporate espionage. "Mr. Chen," one said smoothly, "let's be reasonable. We know your grandfather discovered something. AgriCorp is prepared to pay very well for that information. Nothing to discover, I replied. Just dirt and rusty tractors, remember? Sirens wailed in the distance. The men exchanged glances. This isn't over, the first one said as they edged toward the door. That discovery belongs in professional hands, not with some amateur farmer. They were gone before the sheriff arrived. But they confirmed my fears. Someone at AgriCorp had figured out enough to know the valley was special. They just didn't know exactly why or how. The next morning, I made some calls. By afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Catherine Wong, one of the top agricultural patent attorneys in California. Your grandfather's research is revolutionary, she said after reviewing the documents. The patents are solid, but AgriCorp will challenge them. They've got deep pockets and an army of lawyers. What are my options? She leaned back, thinking. You could sell to them. Make millions. Or we could go public. Release the research through proper scientific channels. Once it's public knowledge, they can't steal it. The patents would protect your rights to the process. And the farm? The unique soil composition makes the land itself valuable. But more importantly, you'd have proof of concept. 20 years of documented success. I thought about Grandpa's words about the land remembering. About his belief in sustainable farming. Selling to AgriCorp would bury his discovery under corporate profits and patents. Going public would share it with the world. The decision wasn't hard. 2 months later, I stood in an auditorium at UC Davis, presenting Grandpa's research to the international agricultural science community. The data was irrefutable. The implications for sustainable farming were staggering. AgriCorp's lawyers filed challenges, but the patents held. More importantly, the scientific community embraced the discovery. Universities requested research partnerships. Sustainable farming organizations offered support and resources. Mark and Linda showed up at the farm, unannounced the day after the presentation made national news. You knew, Mark accused. You knew all along what this place was worth. No, I corrected him. Grandpa knew what it was worth. He also knew what you do with that knowledge. We're family, Linda protested. We deserve a share. You got your share, I reminded them. The import-export business, remember? The one that didn't come with dirt and rusty tractors? They left angry, but I didn't care. I had work to do. Today, the farm is the center of an agricultural research cooperative. The profits from the patents fund sustainable farming initiatives worldwide. Young farmers come here to learn, just as I once learned from my grandfather. Miguel is now the farm manager, overseeing operations while I handle the research and development side. His daughter Maria, who just finished her PhD in soil science, runs our testing lab. A proper one now, not just a converted dining room. The north barn has been preserved, though the safe is empty now. But I still go there sometimes, running my hands over the worn wood, remembering the night I discovered my grandfather's legacy. Last week, a young farmer visited from Vietnam. As we walked the fields, he asked why I hadn't sold to AgriCorp when I had the chance. I showed him the plaque we'd installed by the main gate. It bears my grandfather's picture and his favorite saying, "The land remembers." My grandfather didn't spend 20 years developing this discovery for corporate profits, I explained. He did it because he believed in leaving the land better than he found it, because he believed knowledge should grow like crops, spreading seeds that bear fruit for everyone. The young farmer nodded, understanding. Later, I saw him taking soil samples using one of Grandpa's original testing methods. The land remembers, all right. It remembers every farmer who ever cared for it, who saw its value beyond mere profits. My grandfather's discovery didn't just transform agriculture, it transformed our understanding of what the earth can teach us when we listen. Mark and Linda still won't speak to me. Last I heard, they'd sold the import-export business to a multinational corporation. The money's probably long gone. But here on the farm, things grow. Knowledge grows. Understanding grows. A new generation of farmers learns to work with the land instead of exploiting it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I sit on the porch like Grandpa used to do. Looking out over the fields, I imagine him smiling, knowing his worthless farm is changing the world in exactly the way he'd hoped it would. The land remembers, and thanks to his vision and trust, now the whole world will remember too. In the end, the most valuable inheritance wasn't the patents or the discovery. It was the lesson my grandfather taught me, that true worth isn't measured in dollars or acres, but in what you leave better than you found it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have soil samples to analyze. The land is still teaching us new things, and like my grandfather, I intend to remember every lesson.